A, B, C, easy as 1, 2, 3. So come along with me, and we'll be going through to, Z. Yes, backtracking is back to track, and this time we're going to get educational, as each band's episode will begin with a different letter of the alphabet. You're freaking welcome. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank a friend of mine on Discord named Nameless, and I'm not kidding, that is his name, and that's what he used to request this episode. So, Alice in Chains started in Seattle, Washington in 1987, broke up in 2002, reformed in 2005, and have released music pretty sparingly since then. The gap between their last two albums is 5 freaking years after all, which isn't surprising considering the status that the band accrued in their heyday. Not easy considering that 3 other bands from that same scene, namely Nirvana, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, were also on the rise. Still, it takes a lot to stand out in a pack as revered as that, and I'm about to tell you how well Alice in Chains pull it off. Now, let's face the music. We start with the band's debut album titled Facelift. Boy, do I love it when a first album isn't self-titled. Released in 1990, it would be the first of 3 albums on the Columbia label, and the first of 2 with Dave Jordan as producer, but the only album in the band's history to not have the band producing. Before I talk about the album, I'm going to talk about the background as to how it came to be. That's right, I actually sort of did research this time, maybe. Anyway, a promoter named Randy Houser came across them at a concert, then offered them cash to record some demos. One day before the band was actually due to record, there was a huge marijuana raid at the studio that they were supposed to be recording in, and said studio had to be shut down. However, their last demo recorded, titled The Treehouse Tapes, made its way to the managers of another Seattle band named Soundgarden, whoever they are, who then passed the demo to Columbia's A&R representative, who set up a meeting with the freaking president of the freaking label. Based on the demo that the band was able to get out, said president signed the band in 1989, and then a year later, we get the album. Talk about your luck turning around, which is not hyperbole, because goodness gracious did this album deliver. Oh, and also their drummer played with a broken hand. I'll be damned if I don't respect that. Speaking of the members, let's actually talk about those for a little bit. Lead vocalist Lane Staley, guitarist Jerry Cantrell, bassist Mike Starr, and drummer Sean Kinney. All 4 provide a great moody structure, and it's balanced well with the tone, and they all just blend seamlessly well together too. Of course, not surprisingly for the time, the band was sometimes stoned when they did stuff, but I'll let that slide because it was sort of a product of that era. Lyrically, it covers things like censorship, love and non-conformity, with songs like Sunshine being written about the death of Cantrell's mother, and We Die Young about the band seeing a bunch of kids buying drugs while on a bus trip. It's also produced well, with Dave Jordan providing some great work on the other end of the scale, seemingly just sort of letting the band have fun here. Lane's vocals are sort of mesmerising, honestly, and he pulls you in with his range and tones and charisma as well. Jerry's riffs are fast and furious with some amazing bridge work and solos too. Mike's bass work is nice, thick and groovy, and easy to hear on its own as well. And Storm's drumming is pretty good, fast, balanced and good pacing, and you gotta remember the dude had a fucking broken hand during the recording of this album. Standout songs include Man in the Box, Bleed the Freak, I Know Something About You, Put You Down, and my favourite in Love, Hate Love. Facelift is an iconic grunge album that comes out swinging, it's produced well, it's performed fantastically. I can recommend it, and it's just a smooth ride all the way through, so find it if you can, it's easy to find, and listen to it, because it's good. We then move on to the band's second album, Dirt, released in 1992, making it the shortest gap between releases for the band's albums. Through Columbia again, it was produced by Dave Jordan again, I'm going to keep saying Dave Jordan by accident, but it's okay because this is the last album he produced with them. With Alice in Chains themselves joining in the production for them. This would also be the band's last album with Mike Starr on bass, as it was fired a year later after the album's release, and also contained my first Alice in Chains song, In Them Bones. Thanks, Guitar Hero! Anyway, the background for the album goes as such. Dave Jordan wanted to work with the band again after how much he enjoyed working on their debut, and he got his wish. However, also like with their debut, issues would arrive during recording for this one, as on the first day that the band was set to record, the Los Angeles riots started, so that kind of put a hindrance on things. Hell, Jerry Cantrell was getting some beer from a store on that day that happened when a rioter started looting it. The band soon got out of Dodge and took a sabbatical at the Joshua Tree Desert until shit was again right side up before going back to LA to record the album. Once again, it's kind of gangster, but the riots weren't the only thing putting a dent in the recording process, as Lane Staley checked himself out of rehab for heroin use, and Kinney and Star Avocados at Law were having some drinking problems. Said problems would only rise as Staley would begin showing up stoned, and Jordan would keep telling him to go to rehab, leading to arguments between them. But what happened later? Well, Staley would go cold turkey after reading a horror novel, not the rehab, not the producer telling him to get clean, a freaking book. Paper still has a purpose after all, and it's not just rolling joints. Still, all that infighting did still bring out some utter brilliance in an album that eclipses its original. Songs about things as serious as the band members fighting, Damn That River, and Their Addictions, Godsmack, Sick Man, Junkhead, and Relationships, Down in a Hole, Rain When I Die, to a 43-second long piece about an annoying riff that Cantrell kept playing, which features Tom Arroyo of fucking Slayer on vocals, Iron Gland, to songs about friends and family who passed away, such as Rooster and Wood. The band went through a lot over the course of this album, and it really shows, but they survived, thrived, and found a way to come out swinging. Lane's vocals sound more polished, carrying notes better and expanding on his amazing range, and even plays guitar here and there as well. Jerry's riffs and solos are mean, vicious things and so goddamn fun and dark to listen to. Mike's bass work is good for his last album with them, providing dirty grooves and slamming tones, and Sean's drumming is heavy-hitting, timed well, and just straight fire, son! Standout songs include Damn Bones, because of course it does, the title track, Wood, Rooster, and my favourite in Sick Man. Combining darker, more emotional material with an interesting pseudo-concept, stepped-up songwriting, and amazing production, Dirt is seen as an iconic album for a reason. I can't disagree. It's just amazing, dark, and easy to get into, surprisingly. I can recommend this one with little to zero trouble at all. We then move on to Alice in Chains' third album, Alice in Chains. That's right, the running gag returns again. Released in 1995, it would be the band's last album with Columbia, but their first and only with Toby Wright, with the band themselves helping to produce. It would also be the band's first album with new bassist Mike Inez, and sadly they left with Lane Staley after his death due to an overdose in 2002. May he rest in peace. Anyway, the album itself is a lot different and somehow is a more difficult behind-the-scenes situation than Dirt did, if you could believe that. After the band's previous release, an EP named Jar of Flies, Lane checked in for drug rehab, but it didn't last long, as before the band's subsequent tour, he started using again, leading to them cancelling everything, and even to Lane and Cantrell forming a short-lived supergroup named Mad Season, who had material for their own album, which was taken from stuff that Cantrell planned to release on his own. So when the band started to record for this album, they didn't really have a lot to go on. So they had to use the majority of Jerry's stuff alongside what they already had and just wound up jamming on it, really. Of course, recording probably wasn't helped by Lane chasing a lot and showing up late to recording sessions or barely showing up at all. So while not having other bad things happen like a police drug raid or a famous rioting event, this album wasn't without its drama, mostly due to Lane Staley. Still, the band all held each other through it. They knew they were drifting apart, but they never set out to get each other. Bad shit just happened and it was mostly out of their control. As for the album's overall sound, it's got more of a doom and sludge feel to it, almost shoegazy in a way, and once again deals with dark subjects like addiction, depression, anxiety, loss, love, and so on. The usual Alice in Chains fare, but with a switched up and slower style, it feels sadder somehow. The focus on more melody helps to really get those points across as well. The album's more experimental nature helps too, with different guitar stuff and Cantrell himself providing lead vocals for some of the songs. Grind is about the height of publicity and fame and how fast it can all be brought down. Heaven Beside You is about Cantrell's girlfriend of 7 years breaking up with him. And Sludge Factory is about the label executives telling the band to get the album done quicker because of how much time was already wasted. Still, pressure aside, the band performed well to match the different pace. Lane's vocals still have a newfound grit and droning tone to them that doesn't get boring. Jerry's riffs and styles are evened out well with different techniques tried and some nice slick solos. Mike Inez fits in well as a new bassist with good grooves and heavy tones, and Sean's drumming kills it as usual, heavy hitting, pounding, and balanced, and really, really good. Standout songs include Head Creeps, Shaming You, Brush Away, Grind, and my favourite in So Close. Going even darker and more experimental, with the production matching the new structure beautifully, the band's self-titled third outing is another great album and a good note for the band to have gone out on before their first split. I can recommend it. We move on to the band's fourth album, Black Gives Way to Blue. Released in 2009, there would be a label change as the band released this run through Virgin/EMI, with Nick Raskulinesh, I have no idea if I'm saying that right, as the new producer alongside Alice in Chains themselves. It marks the longest gap between albums with 14 years, as well as being the first without Lane Staley due to his passing 7 years before this album's release, with Jerry Cantrell taking over on lead vocals and bringing in new vocalist/guitarist William Duvall to help out. So the background goes as thus. The band reformed in 2005 to play a benefit show in Seattle for a tsunami disaster, making it the first time the band played together in a decade, sans Stanley or Duvall. Duvall is an old friend of Cantrell's, then they met in LA in 2000, and Duvall's first song with the band was Rooster. The band were hesitant to keep the Alice in Chains name due to Staley's passing, but they pressed on anyway. Unlike other albums, this one seemed like it was better behind the scenes. Sure, it was 14 years since their last album, but considering that the last day of recording was Cantrell's 43rd birthday as well as the birth of Duvall's son, yeah, good fortune just sort of befell it. Except maybe one thing. This album suffered from a severe lack of funding, with Jerry and Sean having to fund it themselves since they didn't have a label until roughly a year before this album actually came out. The style goes back to more of the first two albums, but with more acoustic songs as well that actually fit with the pace, surprisingly. Williams of all even gets his own chance to shine on Less of My Kind, and there's a big difference between how he, Staley, and Cantrell sing, but it's not a deal breaker, and it's another building block to the album structure. The album's lyrical subject matter goes over the band's usual things like sadness, love, and addiction. The song Check My Brain is about Control moving from Seattle to LA. Private Hell is about his breakup with the girl that he loved and that he couldn't go through with it. But it's the closing title track, which is the shortest song on the album at just over 3 minutes long, that feels like the best example. It even features Elton John playing piano, if you could believe that. It's a heartwarming note to close the album on, and I like it. Jerry's vocals have stepped up, and he fits into a comfort zone as the album goes on, with awesome guitar work to boot too. Duvall provides good harmonies and riffs of his own, making him a welcome addition. Mike's bass work still grooves and sounds nice and heavy, and Sean's drumming is hard and fast, as is the usual fare for him, because he's really good at what he does. Standout songs include Check My Brain, the title track, Less of My Kind, Acid Bubble, and my favourite in A Looking In View. Black gives way to blues, an Alice in Chains album for a more modern audience, which is surprising considering it was released 10 years ago-ish. Better production value, accessibility, and a good balance and positiveness to it. I can recommend this one. Next is the band's fifth album, The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. Released in 2013, it's the band's only release through Capitol, although the producers remain unchanged. It's also the band's longest album at over an hour and 7 minutes, and before I talk about it, I'd be wrong not to mention that 2 years prior to this album's release, Alice in Chains' original bassist Mike Starr passed away from a drug overdose at the age of 44. May you rest in peace. Now we can move on to the background, so let's do that. Much like their last album, the recording process behind the scenes was a bit easier. There wasn't a super huge layoff between this and Black Gives Way to Blue, and the band were really looking forward to getting back to writing music. There were only two things holding the band back. First, they hadn't finished touring yet, and secondly, Jerry needed shoulder surgery. The dude was on the shelf for 8 months during said surgery. 8 months is usually how long it takes a band to get recording done, especially a band of Alice in Chains status. But hell, the dude came back strong. I mean, when he was recovering, he had a riff in his head, sang that riff into his phone, and that became one of the songs on the album. And that is pretty cool, I think. The album was even promoted pretty well, with a documentary released on Funny or Die and an anagram of the album's title posted the day before the official announcement for the album's official release. So yeah, once again, not a lot to talk about in terms of background, but what about what's inside? Well, it's your usual AIC style, but for a modern age, and it still sounds dark and covers serious material. The title relates to the theme, pointing at religion for being bad. There's even some political ties as well, and the album's title track has a bit of argument over the correlation between religion and politics, because that's always apparent for reasons. The only other song I was able to find anything about immediately was Phantom Limb, which was written by Duvall even down to the guitar solo. He apparently just pictured someone being trapped under rubble and ran with that as a concept. Weird stuff, but it worked with the band's usual formula, and the production is handled well as always. However, therein lies the album's problem. It's too familiar by this point, and the production has a tendency to sort of bury things. It sounds repetitive in places, and the structure has a tendency to drone, with the vocals stretched out way too far. It's all a bit overpolished to hide what is at its core a solid album. But I think we should blame the label for that, as Nick probably did his best for production, and the band said themselves still perform well. Jerry's vocals are still really good, and he writes a mean riff and solo too. Williams' own vocals sound better, and his guitar playing steps up to the plate. Mike's bass playing is still good for thick tones and riffs, but it's hard to hear everything else. And Sean's drumming is a bit slow, but still balanced and heavy as well. Standout songs include Phantom Limb, Pretty Done, Stone, Breath on a Window, and my favourite in the title track. The album does have its moments, but it plods on, and the band do sound like they're phoning it in from time to time. It just reeks of familiarity, and they try way too hard to hide that. I can recommend this album possibly the least out of their others, but it's still decent. There is still some joy to be had in it. And finally, we reach the band's sixth and most recent studio album, Rainier Fog. Released in 2018, the band would switch labels to BMG, but Nick Raskulininu and the band themselves would still produce. It's also the album that is the shortest, at 53 minutes and 21 seconds. It was also the first Alice in Chains album that I have listened to in full, so yay! Anyway, the background for this album is actually pretty interesting. As usual, the band took their time because they wanted to, and they even returned to Studio X, or Bad Animal as it was once known, to record the album. That same studio was the birthplace of their self-titled third album, and the last one that they recorded with Lane Staley before his passing. Which was a good thing, as the band had parted ways with the previous label before coming over to BMG, so that was a saving grace in and of itself. However, it wasn't a completely flawless recording process. After the band were done at Studio X, they were going to a different studio in Seattle to finish things up, but during a trip to Mexico to celebrate the birthday of Sammy Hagar, Jerry ate some bad food, and his body didn't do well with the medicine they was given afterwards, so he had to recover in LA. It wasn't all in vain, though, as the band's engineer, Paul Figueroa, came over to Cantrell's house to record what they could, so that helped. As for the songs that came with it, it's your usual Alice in Chains fare, and the subject matter is quite interesting. The intro track, The One You Know, is inspired by David Bowie's hit Fame and was written about the time that he passed, so it feels like a tribute to Ziggy Stardust in a way. The title track is about the Seattle grunge scene as a launching pad for bands like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Nirvana and such, with one of the lyrics paying tribute to Staley and Stowe, which is nice. So far, Under is about being pissed off at the world and mad about it, with Duvall once again writing the lyrics and the kick-ass guitar solo too. He also wrote the next song after that, titled Never Fade, which is about the passing of Chris Cornell, Duvall's grandmother, Lane Staley, and other personal death as well. And as always, the music ties in too. It's got more punch and feels faster, and it just works given the shorter time frame. The instruments are delivered with punch and balance, and the structure is maintained well throughout, with very few cracks showing, and thanks to the band members as usual. Jerry and Duvall work off each other better than ever, with better vocal work and trading between the two, not to mention great guitar riffs and slashing solos from both guys. Makes Mike's bass work is nice, heavy, groovy, and just sounds amazing. Sean's drumming feels harder and faster, and yes, more, and once again maintains rhythm effortlessly. Standout songs include Drone, The One You Know, the title track, and my favourite, Never Fade. With a cleaner soundboard production and solid songwriting, Rainier Fog is a solid, well-written and enjoyable album, and I can safely recommend it. So let's do what we always do at the end of these things and round it up. My favourite album was definitely Dirt. Just dark, easy to fall into, and so heavy and grungy and mesmerising and entrancing. I really like Dirt. It's really, really good. Holy crap. Least favourite is The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. It's just way too familiar. It feels complacent and lazy at times. I wouldn't be as mad about it if the band weren't trying as hard as they were. But because they are, it almost makes it feel worse, weirdly. I don't know. Next time, however, we leave the States behind and head over to Sweden for the first time, and I know I checked, as we cover Blindside. Do not make them bones about it. I'm trying to squeeze in more puns. Thank you for watching. Sorry, I haven't done my sign-off right yet. Thank you for watching. You're awesome. Bye-bye.